Now look, I know you think you're some sort of valedictorian super genius. A kind of chthonic ponderer capable of reaching depths of knowledge and wisdom so abyssal and esoteric that it makes even the Grand Mages on X pause their, as of writing this, 603rd succubus summoning general thread to question your mental state and cognitive foundations. That's all well and good. In fact, that is exactly what we're looking for. We need good, strong, and special little boys like you to help our boys out on the front. Are you daring enough to be true special forces? Have you got the gumption needed to go mano-a-mano with the most devious of devils in the green hell of Asia? Fact of the matter is, you're my top guy. The president needs you. I need you. You're not going to let me and the president down, are you? Are you stupid or something? This is the story of how the literally mentally disabled were drafted into the US Army. Because I need a weapon, and buddy, you're it. Project 100,000. Also known as McNamara's Morons. Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. Now, as you're all aware, I'm something of a child. Every Saturday I wake up in my onesie and decide to relive the glory days and tuck myself in front of the TV and watch myself some cartoons. A snapshot of the high life, I know. But every such session needs something scrumptious to chow down on. And that is where today's sponsor, Magic Spoon, steps in. Magic Spoon are the premier cereal brand renowned for being the best on the scene. Don't believe me? Well, I'm happy to say how wrong you are, because Magic Spoon bucks the trend of traditional cereals by maintaining the great taste of that morning breakfast, whilst somehow containing no artificial ingredients. Indeed, Magic Spoon manages to simply and elegantly maintain 4 to 5 grams net carbs per serving, whilst having a high protein and overall high quality meal, whilst also boasting a wide and tasteful range of flavours. The cereal even manages to have 0 sugar, which, trust me, you wouldn't even realise with how good this stuff tastes. But hey, maybe you're not feeling cereal. And that's okay, because Magic Spoon also has a healthy range of treats and granola mix to choose from. The peanut butter one is actually banging, by the way. Sorry, I didn't have any breakfast this morning. But, thanks to this granola, I can remedy that with 13 grams of protein and 0 added sugar. So, if you're carb sensitive, trying to up your protein gains, or even just on the move and need a quick bite, Magic Spoon is here to help. If you want in on this delicious meal, then scan the QR code on the screen and use code Dankula, or click the link in the description box down below to get $5 off. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product that it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee online. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Again, scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description box down below for $5 off when you order. Thanks for the breakfast, Magic Spoon. Now, back to the video. Vietnam. We all know it, and we all love to pretend to be traumatized by it despite the fact that we've never been there. The conflict itself is already well trodden with its iconic mix of technology, ideology, asymmetry, and an absolutely banging soundtrack that really makes the war uniquely aesthetic. But one of the slightly less covered topics was the US military's propensity to experiment in the jungles of Nam. Like, sure, we all know of the shenanigans involving napalm, Agent Orange, and that one time that GIs tried to spook the... I'm not saying that. Spook the Viet Cong with disembodied voices of their dead ancestors, Scooby-Doo style. Didn't really work, by the way. due in part to the fact that Asians are astrally anchored and incapable of any sort of real spirituality. Case in point, Buddhism. But, back on topic, today's little tale begins with our man of interest, US Defence Secretary Robert McNamara. You see, by the time he came into office, the Vietnam War was in full swing, and being quite blunt, it wasn't looking too good. With the NVA and Viet Cong actually being quite the crafty wee bastards, paired with the amount of Yankee boots on the ground being far too low at a mere 16,000. So, Big Rob had come to the conclusion that they would need at minimum an additional 100,000 GIs in the country to be able to win. But how was he to procure that many troops? How could he project 100,000? The solution was deceptively simple. Send more people into Vietnam. Slight issue, however, there wasn't a fantastic amount of manpower to spare, with it being the Cold War and all. And the public was, by and large, hardly keen on enlisting in yet another foreign campaign to contain communism. There was, however, a simple solution to this. Conscription. Though that was guaranteed to cause some quite infamous domestic issues, which is frankly a topic for another day. So, how do these domestic issues affect Big Rob's Indo-Chinese jaunt? Well, you see, during the Johnson administration, the United States took part in the tried and true American tradition of declaring war on abstract concepts and losing. In this case, a tastefully vague war on poverty, which spawned such things as the 1964 Food Stamp Act, Medicare, and all other sorts of ravishing social reform. But the problem was that there was still a fairly large amount of deprived male biomass in the country that was just sitting there being economically unproductive on the account of the fact that they were all clinically stupid. And by that I mean, and I promise I'm not saying this in the offensive way, I am saying it in the medical way, they were all literally mentally retarded. So Big Rob had something of a light bulb moment. Draft the dimwits. It's perfect, because you see, we can conscript all of the lateral thinkers and K-poppers. It's fine, they're going over to Asia, they fucking love that shit, and they can get more boots on the ground in Nam, and as a result, start thrashing Chang. And we can do it whilst claiming that we're giving these absolute idiots a relatively well-paying job and free training. And we'd be able to avoid chasing down the normies who are far too much hassle to press gang due to their economically productive education and insufferable mid-wit snark. Like that tubby munchkin fuck George R.R. Martin. That man dodges drafts like he dodges finishing books. It's such a good and totally airtight plan that even if they don't come back, we would still slowly be raising the United States' average IQ score. We'll get into exactly why this didn't work out, but let's be entirely honest, it's kind of obvious from the outset. But as far as Big Rob was concerned, the US military's cutting-edge technology could more than make up for such human error. Now, for context, this type of mouth-breather mobilisation had been tried before during the second German whoopsie, with the federal government willing to look the other way when it came to those who barely scraped by a rudimentary mental aptitude test. Eventually, through presumed trial and error, they came to the conclusion that the minimum effective IQ for a combat-ready bullet catcher had to be a minimum IQ of 80. Lucky me. Thing is, though, that Big Rob went right out of his way to lower said standards, lowering the minimum pass rate by 6% and hand-waving the need for high school diplomas in order to be eligible for enlistment. Big Rob had a vision. In October of 1966, he created what was officially designated as the New Standards Men, or NSM for short. These Tard-Truppen were to be exclusively plucked from the masses of draftees that were scoring in the lowest 10% in the already lowered mental aptitude tests, and they were to be assigned into 3 groups. Group 1 was for those who were just a bit dumb. Slow learners who needed to be barked at repeatedly for a while but were otherwise mostly fine. Group 2 was for the emotionally, mentally and motivationally stunted. So if you're a lethargic man-child that cries at the newest Marvel movie trailer in between bouts of beating your grandmother because she asked you to take the bins out, your ticket's punched, buster. And as for Group 3, well, Group 3 was for the abhumans, the underweights, the overweights, and the otherwise physically aberrant. Which is quite self-explanatory. Group 3 was basically fat camp. I'm going to start using the term Group 3 to refer to fat women on Twitter. So, once you were assigned into your group, you would be drilled and trained Hartman style up to a standard baseline. Once hitting this threshold, you would be assigned to a random branch of the US military and undergo basic training with the normies. And wouldn't you know it, of the roughly 320,000 new standards men, the vast majority, 190,000, would find themselves put into the US Army and subsequently sent to Vietnam. And not to mention the fact that training was fraught with struggles and abuse was rampant. For example, in one case, drill instructors were caught forging medical documents to move draftees along, so that they weren't their problem anymore. And also, stealing the men's wallets. Yeah, drill sergeants were actually stealing the draftees' wallets. Literally stealing money from the mentally handicapped and then sending them off to die in fucking Vietnam. I know, how fucked up. But the kicker was the fact that Big Rob had lied to us. He claimed that these essentially disabled men totally wouldn't see combat and that this was just an opportunity for the most vulnerable men in society to get a roof over their heads, some money in their pockets, learn some skills, and then leave, returning to society fundamentally better men. If they got to come home at all. Now allow me to paint a picture for you. The window-licking legionnaires were on average around 20 years old, disproportionately black, how about that, from incredibly deprived socio-economic backgrounds, most likely somewhere in the south, were riddled with behavioural, emotional and cognitive issues on top of being literal lily sniffers, some of whom couldn't even fucking speak English and were functionally illiterate, and to top it all off, they were usually without a full high school education, let alone college. Now, I implore you to use your neurologically orthodox normie brain to speculate as to what might happen when you start putting such men in dangerous, unfamiliar and high-stress situations like fucking Vietnam. They were inconsistent in terms of combat effectiveness, to say the least. The general threshold ranged from being middlingly fine to being an outright liability and safety hazard. On average, an NSM would be 9 times more likely to require remedial training, they would be twice as likely to get a combat deployment, and they would be 3 times more likely to be killed in action. Because the NSMs were evidently riddled with comically tragic issues that put them in such danger. And here are some anecdotes. Apparently, there were multiple cases of the NSMs giving away their positions due to the fact that they weren't using their inside voices during an ambush. Or the fact that one NSM guarding a patrol base shot his fucking platoon leader after forgetting the password that he was supposed to listen out for. As such, when the platoon leader spooked the poor lad by walking up to the base in the open and saying something that theoretically might not have been the password, meant that he was totally Viet Cong. So he fucking shot him. Within their units, they were very often discriminated against for being fucking dumbasses, with there being reports of some patrol groups forcing the NSMs to march at the front of the formation, so that they could trip any potential mines or traps laid out on the route. Which is extremely fucked up, but I mean, if anybody's going to get their legs blown off, we could at least make sure it's the dumb ones. I mean, what the fuck did you think would happen? These were the sorts of guys that should be staying back home, eating glue and getting into all sorts of innocently cartoonish hijinks. And then Big Rob the Satan Man grabbed him, tagged him, and stuck him in a jungle far, far away to be shot at and poo-poo staked by the literal fucking Viet Cong. And it's not like it would get any better when they got home. being an especially vulnerable subsection of the already cast aside and downtrodden veterans community, especially for the time. Veterans nowadays get shat on by the state. And I know that the VA, that's the Veterans Affairs, a Fed branch for dealing with veterans, is fucking useless. However, a lot of these boys were physically incapable of even writing a resume, let alone getting it into the hands of an employer for them to reject. So let me close this video off with a Department of Defense study from 1989 looking back on the project. According to said study, it was literally the case that those who were passed over for the NSM were actually better off occupationally, financially, educationally, and even maritally, making the entire project a cataclysmic failure. And, like every other demonic, morally bankrupt, and just outright disgusting thing that the government does, they just completely got away with it.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube. Everybody should subscribe.